The Jaguars are so good, they can rest their starters in the third quarter. Justin Jefferson came up short for everybody in their Super Bowl championships, and a whole lot more on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by No House Advantage. Jeff Erickson and Nick Whalen here. It is championship weekend. A lot of big championships. I was in 6 different finals, 5 of which were brutal, like awful, no good. And I'm counting a couple in NFFC format. One NFFC, one the Raz Bowl. Just awful day for me yesterday. But it won't matter if the Bengals win tonight, Nick Whalen.
It most certainly won't. That'll erase quite a bit for you. Seeding certainly on the line for the Cincinnati Bengals tonight. I personally am looking forward to getting the full Week 18 schedule, which is expected to come perhaps at halftime of that Monday night game. Heard some rumblings about that. But who cost you your fantasy championships across these various leagues? I'm curious to know who we need to be angry at heading into the offseason.
So I'm not angry. I'm disappointed, first of all. But no, Justin Jefferson, I can't be mad at him because he carried me there, and it really wasn't truly his fault. It was primetime Cousins that was the problem. And the Vikings offensive line issues just got blown up big time. I think that was an underrated storyline there. Just everything fell apart. A lot of players not doing a whole lot. It's your guy, Trevor Lawrence. I had to start him in the NFFC because Jalen Hurts wasn't playing, and we're not allowed pickups in the playoffs. So my 2 quarterbacks were Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence had like 3 points or 6 points or whatever for me. He threw an interception. There's negative points for that. And, every touchdown was either a rushing or a defensive touchdown. So just nothing. And the thing is, I knew that was a risk. I mean, the game literally was meaningless to them, except for just the whole keep the momentum going. It didn't matter what happened in that game. As a result, I knew that was coming. I can't really get too mad about that, but it happens. So let's start in the NFC South. Let's talk about your Jaguars, primetime Jaguars, as the case may be, playing Saturday night this week.
Yeah, well, they still can't get the Sunday or the Monday primetime game, but now they'll play it on Thursday and Saturday, and if they win, we'll see how that playoff schedule shakes out. Almost everything went the Jags' way. Obviously they took care of business against Houston. Could have used a loss by the Pittsburgh Steelers last night to Baltimore. That would have given a better chance to get that wild card window open in the event that Jacksonville were to lose to Tennessee. But either way, the Jags have to feel really good heading into Saturday night. I just got an alert that the Titans have officially named Josh Dobbs their starter for that game. I would rather see Malik Willis out there just because
of course you would.
Josh Dobbs made some throws, man. He didn't play great, but he was certainly an upgrade over Malik Willis. He looks like a much more confident, experienced player. So that worries me a little bit, but at the same time, I don't know how you can look at what happened yesterday and have any less faith in Jacksonville. They absolutely took care of business. They did exactly what they needed to do. And really, this is kind of the script that we talked about all week on the XM show, right? Was, get up early, basically play your starters as long as you have to. This is a winnable game, a game that you want to win for wildcard purposes. And as soon as you feel like you have it in hand, pull those guys. And, I think they executed it perfectly. They were up 28-0 in this game before we saw CJ Beathard.
Yeah, that pick 6 by just slayed me. It was great for the Jaguars, just killed me. Just absolutely killed me because I knew after that they had no incentive to try to air it out that much after that. Lawrence did throw his pick after that. He still ended up with like 150 passing yards, but I needed something. Anything just to get through this. And I didn't get it. I put together like such a low score in my NFFC primetime. I started off around 35th, top 22 payout for the overall. I ended Sunday like around 110. He wasn't the only person to blame, and I had some flawed roster issues too. Like second running back was pretty weak, but I had a lot of things that were working, and most of them didn't work. The only thing that really worked was George Kittle doing his thing because he's been a playoff monster, but just brutal. But you know what? Hey, good for the Jaguars. And I'll say Saturday night, I mean, it's the night game on Saturday too, not just a Saturday standalone game, but also Saturday night when this is a game with meaning, with heft. I agree. It shouldn't be the Sunday night one. It shouldn't be shouldn't be the one where you're like, okay, I'm really excited.
Speak for yourself.
No, but you know what I'm saying? It's a battle for, 8 and 7 versus, or 9 and I guess what? Yeah. Did I get it right? 8 and 8 versus 7 and 9.
Yep.
To get in. I mean, it's what it deserves. It's a very important game. And the Jaguars are obviously playing very well. It's study and contrast. That's for sure.
I would prefer Saturday night, from just a watchability fan perspective. Maybe get some people together here in Milwaukee if I could kind of scrounge up some Jaguars interest among my friend group. So yeah, I'm fine with it. I would rather that than, this game be at noon on Sunday or in the afternoon window on Sunday. I think there were some dreams of maybe getting that Sunday night spot, but for several reasons, which I'm sure we'll discuss, I think there are some better options. And I'm actually going to be in the house at Lambeau Field for Lions Packers next week.
Nice.
We don't have a time on that. It's for sure going to be sometime on Sunday, but we have a potentially great or potentially disastrous weekend for Nick Whalen coming up.
Yeah, no doubt. I feel the same way about, yours is more do or die to get in the playoffs. Bengals, it's seeding. But obviously it starts tonight with the Bengals Bills. Massive game. I could, if I was grouchy this morning about how everything went, I'm going to be really grouchy tomorrow if when the Bengals lose, but I don't know. We'll see. Anything else from the specifics from the Jaguars Texans game? I mean, ETN broke off the big run. That was nice to see. I didn't get to see a whole lot of it. It wasn't on Red Zone that often. It wasn't on the 8 Grid channel. So I have to do a rewatch of the game, but since they put it in the cooler in the third quarter, I don't know if I really want to go through that.
No, I would maybe watch the first half. Lawrence did throw a pick. Other than that, super sharp. I mean, he was 17 of 21 for 152. Didn't really have to do much on the ground. That long run by ETN ripped off the 62-yarder. That's really what kind of broke this game open for Jacksonville. And, we saw Snoop Connor getting in on the action. We saw JaMychal Hasty getting in on the action. CJ Beathard looked terrible when he came in, but, the game was basically over at that point. But if you weren't paying close attention, if you're just wondering for fantasy purposes, I mean, Lawrence and the starters basically played just the first series of the third quarter, and that was it. So they were out at about the 9.5 minute mark. Yeah.
All right. Titans and Cowboys. As alluded, Josh Dobbs looked like a replacement level quarterback, which is a compliment compared to Malik Willis. They actually could do some throws, not a lot. And as the game went on, you could start to see Dallas was starting to figure him out a little bit more too. I think it's pretty clear that that's transparent. That is the right decision of starting him over Willis. With Willis in there, it takes away a big chunk of their offense. That you just can't make certain plays.
Exactly. I think, with Willis, the idea is that you have this dynamic rusher and you have to account for that. But, frankly, outside of a few, kind of highlight plays for Willis, I think he had a touchdown a couple games ago, made a guy miss. If he's not doing that routinely, he's not worth what you're sacrificing as a passer. And look, I mean, Josh Dobbs is not going to step in and be Patrick Mahomes here, but I think he was significantly more competent against a pretty good defense on Thursday night. So, looking at this from a Jaguars perspective, I would absolutely rather have Malik Willis start this game. And you're going to feel pretty good about it either way, whether it's Dobbs or Willis, and it will be Dobbs. But at least Dobbs is a professional quarterback who can make throws. And with Willis, you just don't have that level of confidence. So, I think if you're Tennessee, you come out of this game feeling okay. I mean, this was a 7-0 game at the half. Tennessee, really threatened at points, 7-0 at the end of the first, 10-6 at the half. I think everybody was expecting Tennessee to just get completely blown out of the water here. So you went into this game with no expectations, but I think you come out feeling okay. You feel like, all right, we're comfortable with Josh Dobbs. We've seen it for a game, got some reps in with guys like Treylon Burks and Robert Woods, who had a touchdown in this game. And I think what you have to remember is Derrick Henry did not play. And obviously that changes things for next week. So comfortable if I'm the Jaguars, confident, but this is not going to be a walk in the park. I think we know that.
Yeah, Jeffrey Simmons didn't play. They held out some key players here. Dallas, on the other hand, lost their center. Got his ankle rolled up. They're talking about him it's a high ankle sprain. Optimistic about a postseason return. We'll see. I mean, they had to do all sorts of shifting just to get everybody, get their line reset during that game. And the broadcast spent a good amount of time focusing on that. We'll see. I mean, Dallas has something to play for. With Philly losing yesterday, they still could actually catch the Eagles, which, we'll see if that happens. I'm curious to see if one of those two games gets flexed to the night game, but you know what? It's interesting to see that, Philly hasn't clinched number one, the first seed. They haven't clinched the division.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe in staff picks, I made Philly my best bet this past weekend. I thought they were in a fantastic spot against a basically dead in the water Saints team, and Gardner Minshew looked awful in that game. So I think Philly is certainly lucky that Jalen Hurts is on track to return next week. And I think if you're Philly, you had hoped that week 18 you could take it easy. Maybe you get Hurts some reps just to kind of get his rhythm back. You cruise into the bye, and that's not the case anymore. I mean, this becomes a close to a must-win game for Philly with how valuable the 1 seed is. Luckily, you get the New York Giants. They're not really playing for much here. They are locked in as the 6, I believe. So maybe you see a diminished version of the Giants. So Philly should be in good shape, but somewhat of an alarming performance, even with a backup quarterback, by the Philadelphia Eagles. In terms of those games being flexed, would they want to keep them at the same time? Philly, Giants, and Dallas. I think they have the Commanders.
Yeah, I think so. The eliminated Commanders, by the way, as Ron Rivera found out after the fact. But
tough way to find out.
Oh my gosh, that went viral quick. And it's so funny. Grant Paulson's the one that asked hit the question of him. I got to know Grant a little bit way back when we started XM started the MLB home plate before the Sirius XM merger. Now Grant's big time. He probably doesn't remember me, but he used to do minors and majors, and he used to do he used to be a prospect guy for baseball. Now he's asking Ron Rivera questions that go viral, but it's pretty funny. I think I don't know if that press conference is really had that much heft on whether Ron Rivera should keep his job, but oh my goodness, just the whole Carson Wentz decision. Let's start Carson Wentz. Why not?
That could not have gone worse. Right away, it was just, again, and it's hard to say. It's like maybe Heineke comes out and does the same thing. But for this decision to be made, and we talked about it last week, it's close to unprecedented. I guess unless you want to throw the Titans in that basket of, making a quarterback change at this point in the season, unrelated to injury, you got to be confident. It's a swing, and you bench the guy who essentially saved your season when you were 1-6, and you go back to Carson Wentz and he starts this game with a pick. You go out on downs on your next possession and then another pick. And yet Washington, after a 21 play drive to end the first half, is still leading this game 7-3. I didn't really think Cleveland played all that well. They did put their foot on the gas a bit in the third quarter, but to me, this was more about Washington outside of that one long drive, just not being able to move the ball. I mean, turnovers aside, Carson Wentz, 143 yards through the air, and Brian Robinson, 87 yards total on the ground. That's fine, but took 24 carries to get there. So we haven't had a lot of praise for this Cleveland Browns team, especially since Deshaun Watson came back. But especially from a Packers perspective, this was a huge win for Cleveland.
It was. I did not see this one coming. This is another one where I got aggressively wrong. But then again, I should have maybe seen it because of the quarterback change. I mean, just, the Commanders were in the driver's seat. They were in a commanding position, so to speak. Yes, that was so bad. I know. And I'm not.
Yeah, again, you had to.
Yeah, had to go for it there. Just such a weird decision, such a weird spot. I understand Heineke is not great. I understand there's legit criticisms about him, but we did see the Carson Wentz show beforehand. We saw why they took their time in bringing him back, why they said that Heineke would still be the starter when he came back. Well, they're out now. They went from being the odds-on favorite to win the 7 seed to being out. So be it there. And part of that is because Heineke played poorly against the Giants on that Sunday night game. I get it.
Exactly. He it was kind of the spiritual leader, it felt like, of Washington getting the season turned around. But at the same time, you weren't looking at those games and saying, like, man, Taylor Heineke is willing this team to victory. Like, a lot of mistakes were being made. They were winning close games. The defense and the running game were really what was carrying Washington. So, yeah, again, it's not like a completely indefensible move to go to Carson Wentz, but it just felt like a shakeup for the sake of making a change. And I think they just didn't really have quite enough rationale, I guess, to justify that, especially I think when I mean, it's obvious, even from our perspective, how much this team, I think, enjoyed rallying around Taylor Heineke. And it feels like no matter where Carson Wentz is, whether it's in Washington or Indy or Philly, he's had kind of the opposite effect.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. So, and although, you know what, before he got hurt in Philly, he was an MVP candidate. He was legit. He was having a good year, got hurt, and his life has changed for and same with Nick Foles, who we'll get to in a bit too. But just wild stuff there. So going back to Tennessee and Cowboys, anything else from that game that you had to take away from? No Tony Pollard. We'll see if he comes back this week, but Zeke didn't run all that well. He got his touchdown, but Titans are still a tough team to run against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Titans really stepped up. I think defensively played much better than expected. I was on the radio with Alan for the first half of that game, and we were kind of discussing how so often it feels like when there's a game where coming in, you're like, how are the Titans going to compete? This could be 30-0 at the half, and it just went completely opposite. You could tell from the first drive. I think Dallas had a quick 3 and out, and you're like, okay, Tennessee is not going to roll over here. And I think whether this qualifies as a true takeaway or not, we could quibble about that. But Dak Prescott, man, turnovers every single week. I mean, this is 6 straight weeks with at least one turnover. He lost a fumble. He threw 2 picks. He's got multiple interceptions 4 times in the last 6 games. You could get away with it against Tennessee. You can get away with it against teams like Houston and Indianapolis. You're not going to be able to get away with that against a formidable opponent in the playoffs. So something to keep an eye on is the ball security for Dak Prescott and that Cowboys offense. Yeah.
So if the seeds hold, the Cowboys would play the Bucks, who clinched yesterday with that win over the Panthers. I was feeling pretty good about my predictive powers, thinking that Carolina was a good bet to not just cover, but outright win in Tampa. Oh, Tampa never throws deep, blah, blah, blah. Oh, Mike Evans comes alive. And, speaking of things that I can blame, in the Stake League, I was going up against Scott Jenstead, who had Tom Brady going. That was fun to go against. Showed something that he hadn't shown seemingly all year, Nick. Where did this come from?
It's funny because we talked last week about, like how different that first Carolina Tampa Bay game would have been if Mike Evans had been able to reel in that long pass early in the game. He had 2 of those in this game, like almost the exact same play. I mean, CJ Henderson, my goodness, ex-Jag, one of the worst top 10 picks ever. He was a massive liability throughout this entire game, essentially cost Carolina the game, giving up 2 of those touchdowns to Mike Evans, just let him run right by him. Didn't even really run a route. It was just kind of a straight line. I can tell you, I was on the wrong end of this too. I mean, I've talked about my much ballyhooed Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin team that was in first place. Of course, lost in the first round of the playoffs, but put up 161 in a completely meaningless 6th place game in that league. So that was nice to see. But yeah, I mean, I don't really think Tampa Bay played all that differently than it normally does. I think they were just a little more willing, I guess, to take those shots. I think better teams with better cornerbacks. Those aren't there, but it's not like Tampa Bay ran the ball effectively in this game. They were 25 for 67, so they did run into a lot of the same issues they've had all season. And there were multiple times in this game where it looked like Carolina was in control, and if they could just get one stop, they were going to win this game. And of course, they couldn't get it. But honestly, I think the injury to J.C. Horn, like Carolina not having J.C. Horn, may have cost them their season in this game.
I agree. It was massive. The Sam Darnold's fumble was huge.
That was so bad.
That was a big turnaround in that game. I mean, they're still ahead at that point, and then they, that ended the. I mean, that really changed the momentum big time there. I mean, but Brady, I went up at Tom Brady. I mean, I had him below. This is how bad it was. Thing is it was a bad week for me, both professionally and personally. Like I lost these championship games, but I had Brady below Gardner Minshew, below Teddy Bridgewater. Someone Old Takes exposed me for answering somebody's question. Like a random third party came in and tagged Old Takes exposed. I mean, seriously, this happened. I don't know where this person came from either. I guess he was like seeking out people that defame Tom Brady or something. Cause I don't know. The guy doesn't even follow me. Just like, okay, you're rude. But whatever. I mean, I'm wrong. Clearly I was wrong. I'll own it. That's fine. But you have no agency in this. You're like some random third party here. But anyways, this is why ranking players and helping out and start sit, sometimes it's annoying to go through this, but hey, I got it wrong. 432 and a rushing touchdown too, to boot. That was a nice little cherry on top there. So I'm going to lose my stake league battle where I had Dalton Schultz and Kevin Byard on Thursday night. I'm like 2 interceptions from my safety, 2 touchdowns from a tight end. Let's go. And then no, I got ruined. And I actually put up a decent number.
Yeah, ironically, the host of the Let's Go podcast ends up sinking you here. I mean, 432 from Tom Brady. How could you not see this coming, Jeff? You should have known that finally this offense would click out of nowhere against Carolina. I mean, it is classic Tampa Bay, though, right? I mean, you just kind of felt like this was inevitable. I talked all week about how much I want Carolina to win this game, and yet when it came time to picking the game, I was like, I don't know if I can do it. It's like you just feel like Tampa Bay, they don't deserve it. They might not even be the better team, but that's just kind of how it's gone for Tom Brady his entire career. And now here we are yet again with Tampa Bay in the field. And, Dallas is going to be favored in that game. It will be at Tampa Bay. But look, I just think Dallas is not, not really proven anything. Not really. They don't really get the benefit of the doubt at this point. Like I think there's going to be a mounting case as we get to that first round matchup of, well, could Tampa Bay maybe pull this off? Or is that offense starting to click at the right time? Like, we know that storyline is coming. I don't know if I'm ready to buy in on it. I just don't think I can. But nonetheless, RIP to the Carolina Panthers, one of the fun bad teams in the NFL this year.
Yeah, DJ Moore doing what we expected from him all year. Finally, Mike Evans doing what he expected from. If we could see this Tampa Bay more often, I'm looking forward to seeing them play the Cowboys. I'd be into this, but we'll see. I think this is going to cost Steve Wilkes a chance to get the full-time gig. Even though I think he piloted them pretty well after they fired Matt Rule. But I know there was some talk he's making the case, the team's behind him and all that, but he kind of needs to win. And I think this pretty much cements that away. But because keep in mind, yes, he looked good, or the team looked better, but in the worst division in football.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think it's important to keep that in mind. One last note, by the way, on Tom Brady, more touchdowns in the fourth quarter this season than the other 3 quarters combined, which totally checks out. If you watch the Bucs, it feels like he's good for at least one every fourth quarter, and they do nothing the rest of the game. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. Godwin did his usual thing, just kind of chunk plays here and there. It always feels like he's catching these contested slants and like taking 5 hits, and yet he always hangs on. Found his way into 120 yards on 9 catches. And DJ Moore, had an unbelievable contested catch in the second half of this game.
Yes,
I think it's kind of felt like a down year for him. Like he really suffered with the quarterback issues the first half of the season, but he has reminded us over the second half, that he is a true number 1 receiver.
Sam Darnold, 23 of 37, 341, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, the 2 sacks, and then of course the killer fumble. Let me ask you, or 2 fumbles lost actually. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. Has he done enough to make of a case to assert himself as the starter for the Panthers next year?
I think he is the current starter, and I think the Panthers will look hard at other options. I think if it's Sam Darnold next year, you don't feel great about it, but it's not disastrous. This is not quite a Zach Wilson situation where you're saying, like, I don't think we can win any games with this guy at quarterback. With Darnold, I think, he's certainly proven that he has a higher floor, I think, than he showed at times last year. Coming into the season, there were questions as to whether we would see Darnold at any point. So I think he's, all in all, it feels like kind of a plus season for Darnold, and that's not saying a whole lot. But I think Carolina is one of those teams that, depending on how the draft shakes out, they'll take a look there. I think they could be in the Derek Carr type of market. They could be in the Jimmy G type of market. So I don't think Darnold has shown enough that the Panthers are out of that type of consideration. I think they are still in upgrade mode, but I think it's Darnold indefinitely, if that makes sense. And the second fumble, by the way, not necessarily his fault. It was a sack fumble where the Panthers left tackle, the rookie, just got completely beat. Darnold really didn't have a chance. The guy was on him within like 2 seconds. So
I agree.
It goes down as a turnover nonetheless, but that was more, I thought, more on the tackle than on Darnold.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that there. Sticking in the division, Saints upset the Eagles. We alluded to this a little bit more. Getting Marshawn Lattimore back, huge for the Saints. Nonetheless, they're still knocked out because the Bucs won. But for 2 minutes, that game ended 2 minutes before Carolina Tampa Bay did, and losing 2 minutes of game time. They were still alive for a little bit. They say they kept themselves alive. The Saints are kind of a what could have been sort of season. I still think, I want to see what would have happened if Jameis was there instead of Andy Dalton. I understand. I thought maybe even at the time it made sense, but the more Andy Dalton played, the more I'm like, why isn't Jameis in there?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there was a time in the middle of the season when I actually felt like Andy Dalton was giving them something. They had that big win over Seattle where they put up almost 40, and you're thinking, okay, the offense actually looks pretty decent under Andy Dalton. But, pretty much after that game, immediately it was just kind of a slow decline. And, they very quietly won 3 games in a row here. And if they had just finished off that Buccaneers game, that of course
either of them,
there was a comedy of errors, right? Either Buccaneers game, but the more recent game where, if Mark Ingram goes down in bounds, if they don't have like 7 terrible coaching decisions in the second half, they win that game relatively easily, we'd be talking about, a potential playoff team here. So like you said, it does go down as a what if season, kind of just a lost season in general, right? It's like you didn't really make any progress as far as who's the future quarterback of your franchise. Guys like Michael Thomas, look good early in the season, didn't play, but still really no solution as to whether he's a part of your future. I think the one plus is Chris Olave looks legit, and Alvin Kamara stayed healthy, but now you go into next year wondering about a potential suspension. So yeah, it's just kind of like an incomplete for me. Like I don't really know what to even think about the Saints heading into next season. They're one of those teams that is just permanently in that middle ground.
Yeah, I agreed. And they're going to still play around the whole Taysom Hill thing, and that did work at times. Yesterday he was an effective runner, 14 for 46 with the rushing touchdown, grinded out a number of first downs, threw 2 passes. I mean, it's funny. They got 13 points in the first half. No offensive scores in the second half at all. Andy Dalton got sacked 6 times, Taysom Hill another. I mean, this offense really ground to a halt in the second half, but the defense really stood up. This is the thing. The defense sacked Minshew 6 times in their own right. Minshew threw a pick. The Eagles, I mean, the play calling was probably pretty bad. Only 2 running plays in the entire first half. All that Gardner Minshew love, I think we can, we don't have to worry about that anymore. And there's none of that talk anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some chatter yesterday of like, did Gardner Minshew play his way out of potentially starting for someone else next season? Which I don't know if I'd go that far. I think there are still some teams, like perhaps Carolina, that maybe we'll sniff around on Minshew. I certainly don't think he's guaranteed to start anywhere next season. But, he's one of those guys that's going to continue to be in demand. Weird interception at the end of this game. Looked like he was targeting A.J. Brown on a slant type of route. And, Lattimore was sitting right on it, picked it off, short pick 6. But A.J. Brown, didn't really complete the route. I don't know if there was some sort of miscommunication there or if Minshew had just predetermined that he was throwing it to A.J. Brown. But that was the capper on just an ugly afternoon for Philly. And we've seen this now. I mean, they've only lost 3 games, and 2 of them have come in the last 2 weeks with a backup quarterback. But in situations where they feel like the offense isn't quite clicking, they do tend to press a little bit. They do tend to force the issue, kind of try to get it all back in one play, that type of feeling. And you mentioned, I mean, the lack of rushing attempts, that is what the Eagles do well, is move the ball on the ground. And, removing Jalen Hurts changes that, but it shouldn't change it to this degree. I mean, 67 total rushing yards in this game. Completely got away from Sanders, completely got away from Boston Scott. I mean, Kenneth Gainwell didn't have a single carry in this game. So, it's not really a panic type of situation for Philly. I think they're still in a good spot to get one and take care of business next week. But like we said at the top, they didn't want it to come to this.
Yeah. Gainwell had 1 carry. He had touchdown.
I didn't see
called
that.
back on a holding penalty. And then we never saw him again. It was crazy. We're done with you. Okay, good job. Have a nice day. He had 2 catches on 2 targets also, but that was and they had to settle for a field goal in that sequence too. So you're right though about the pressing part. Absolutely right about that. Now, they should kill the Commanders. Who knows who's going to be their quarterback? Could be, Sam Allen, who knows? And there's a lot, Hurts should be back, and we'll see about his health. Maybe he shouldn't be. I don't know. We'll see.
Before we move on, that's an interesting question. Like, let's say Hurts is, he's basically 100%, but you're maybe a little concerned. Like, are you comfortable starting Gardner Minshew against the Giants next week? Or do you feel like Hurts has to be out there to seal that 1 seed?
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, it's Dallas against the Commanders. My bad. I got that wrong.
Yep.
Good question. So the thing is, I mean, if it's less than 100% Hurts, well, I don't know. I mean, that one seed's pretty darn important because Dallas is going to win.
Exactly.
Or you got a pretty good feeling that Dallas is going to win. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good call. I mean, it's a good question. Giants. I saw Dable say he's not going to rest anybody. I'll believe that when I see it, but because the Giants can't catch the Cowboys, can they?
No, they can't. The Giants are at this point officially locked in as the 6. I mean, no matter what team gets in, whether it's Green Bay, Detroit, or Seattle, that team's going to be 9-8. The Giants are 9-6. So worst case, they're 9-7. So yeah, they are officially the 6.
Okay. So Dable says they're not going to sit anybody, but I'd be surprised if they play the whole game. I don't buy it. But then again, you don't want to get just destroyed again by the Eagles like they did earlier this year. I don't know. It's an interesting call. And you're not. This is the Minshew experience. You're familiar with this. He can look brilliant at times and look terrible at other times. This is the same thing he did in Jacksonville.
It really is. It really is. He's a super, super fun player to watch. I mean, ultimately, he's probably closer to Taylor Heineke than I'd like to admit. Very similar type of moxie, same type of attitude. I think he's week to week. I think he has a higher floor and maybe even a higher ceiling than Taylor Heineke. But yeah, it's one of those situations where I think everybody loves Gardner Minshew, but then when it says like, if you were asked like, do you want this guy to be your permanent starting quarterback? Then it starts to get a little iffy. I think he's a fun guy to have on the roster. He's a fun guy to plug in every now and then, but to me, it's kind of hard to see a team truly committing to him going forward. But this was a big opportunity. It really was. I think both he and Mike White for the Jets, I mean, both of those guys, I think, are kind of in similar situations, potentially playing, for Minshew, looking at other teams. White, kind of an audition for next season with the Jets, and neither of those guys played well.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed. Before we move out of the NFC East and South and move into the North, a quick note from our friends at the No House Advantage, who has been sponsoring our football podcast all year. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today, playing pick'em contests versus other people for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all of your picks. Bet on up to 5 player prop over-unders or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up now with promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com or download the app on the app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. All right, Nick, let's get on to other happy talk for you. Talk a little Packers-Vikings. Huge win for the Packers. And this was like a squash the entire game. The Vikings at the blocked punt had to settle for a field goal with a terrible red zone sequence. Just terrible. That set the tone for the day. Settled for the 2-yard field goal. Or it kicked when the ball was at the 2-yard line. Just a terrible red zone plays. And then give up the return, the subsequent kickoff for a touchdown right after that. And it just felt like, okay, here we go.
It really did. It really did. I mean, this game got away from Minnesota immediately. And, like around halftime when, of course, this is just one of those games, like once a year, Green Bay has a game where it just feels like everything goes their way. And Mason Crosby doinking in a 56-yarder just before half was kind of the final cherry on top for a game that felt like it was over after the first 2 quarters. And yeah, I mean, by halftime, I was texting with some friends saying like, this doesn't even feel like the same game where, 45 minutes ago in real time, the Packers had this horrible 4th and 1 where they did their typical deep shot on 4th and 1. Rodgers ends up taking a sack. And, that was just a couple possessions after the block punt. And it's like, those feel like completely different games. Like how was Green Bay up 27-3 when you go out on downs with a 15-yard sack and you have a punt blocked at your 1-yard line? And yet at one point they led this game 41-3. So it was even more of a blowout than that final score would indicate. I mean, if you were on Twitter at all, there were a lot of people doing the live point differential for Minnesota, which is just, I mean, at one point they were in their 4 losses this year. They're like minus 85, which is just insane. Like the Saints have a way better point differential than the Vikings. on the year. The list goes on. But look, I did not see this coming. We'll talk about it on the XM show tonight, I'm sure. But I got to eat crow here. I thought Green Bay was much more of a fraudulent team. I thought this was a situation where maybe they get knocked back down to earth. I was all over Justin Jefferson over 95.5 yards on Prize Picks, and that was a disaster. I criticized Jair Alexander for calling out Justin Jefferson. I'm like, don't poke the bear. Why do we need to do this? But boy, did he back it up, man. I just did not see any of this performance coming. I mean, the Green Bay defense just creating turnovers all day, forced a fumble, had 3 picks from Kirk Cousins. I mean, we talked about Keyshawn Nixon, how big of a deal he is to this team. What a weapon he's become. He was banged up coming into this game. I mean, it was just a thorough beatdown for the Packers. And now, I mean, how many times have we seen this for Minnesota? All 4 of their losses have been definitive, just really, I mean, beatdowns, right? I mean, this was just as bad as the Dallas game.
Yeah. Horrible game for them. I mean, and it was weird. They kept Cousins in, but took Jefferson out. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you on that one there. That's when I knew I was dead. Just DED, dead. Yes, I know that's a purposeful misspelling. It's the thing I do. But yeah, it was just horrible game, and just miserable there. Couple other things. Yeah, they did do the 16-yard sack on the horrible 4th and 1 play, and it didn't even matter. They learned in game 1, they didn't shadow Jefferson. Alexander just took a side. This game, he did shadow Jefferson, and that made a big difference. I don't think the Vikings were prepared for that. And they bracketed him too. There were 2 guys on him many times. Yeah,
I mean, can't say enough good things about Jair Alexander. Again, I mean, if you told me who do you think is going to win that battle, I would take Jefferson, and it just didn't happen. It didn't, and Green Bay did a good job. I think pressuring Kirk Cousins. He was only sacked twice, but just never looked comfortable. I mean, all 3 interceptions were pretty ugly, kind of forced type of throws. We ended up seeing some Nick Mullins action late in this game. He tacked on a touchdown, but yeah, this was just a thorough beatdown. I think if you told Minnesota, like, hey, Aaron Rodgers is going to complete 15 passes for 159 yards and 1 touchdown, and the game is going to end with Jordan Love in at quarterback, you would say, yeah, I'll take that. I think we probably won by 20 points, and yeah. It was the defense for Green Bay. I mean, they ran the ball well, but it just didn't really feel like anything the Packers did on offense mattered. Like the kick return and the defensive touchdown. I mean, that was basically enough to win the game, and everything felt like gravy after that.
Yeah, exactly. The third quarter, okay, let's get some hope. We got Jefferson a catch. All right, let's go. Misses a field goal. And then the Packers take this long drive to eat up the rest of the third quarter. Like, okay, so it's over. There's not going to, they kept on saying, well, this isn't going to be a 33-point comeback. Yes, we know this. Thank you. As if that was like, oh, well, they've done it once before. I mean, just think about that with their Vikings point differential. It is what it is. Includes a 33-point comeback.
Right.
I mean,
crazy. Absolutely crazy. Yeah. I mean, of all the games for them to win, the one where they're down 33. By the way, the other play that I think really ended up sealing this game, and it did lead to the AJ Dillon rushing touchdown, was the Cousins strip sack by Kenny Clark. And that was coming out of the half. Green Bay had just punted, and you're thinking, you're up 24 points. So you're not really worried at that point, but you're like, okay, I mean, if Minnesota, if they cut it to 27-10, maybe get another stop, all of a sudden this could get a little bit uncomfortable. And the Vikings were putting together a really nice drive that they had like 4 first downs in a row on some long completions. And, they're down at the 15-yard line. I mean, it did feel like they were going to get at the very least a field goal. And in comes Kenny Clark for a strip sack. And at that point, the game was basically over. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So the big game is going to be Green Bay hosting Detroit this week. Detroit, speaking about improbable, both Green Bay and Detroit had their improbable stretches there where they pulled, they came in, just crushed, just after huge digging themselves out of a huge hole. The funny thing is, even though Green Bay's got a worse record right now, it's currently I think they're currently in 9th place in the NFC. Of the 7, 8, 9 teams, they're the only one that controls their own destiny. If Green Bay wins, they're in.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's going to end up affecting potentially what time slot this game gets. There's a lot of momentum for, Green Bay Packers, Sunday Night Football. I could see that. That's definitely a possibility. We'll find out later today. But I think historically the NFL tries to line up these games, right? So you would want Detroit and Green Bay playing at the same time as Rams Seahawks, because let's say you give Green Bay, Detroit the night game, and Seattle plays in the afternoon window. If Seattle wins, Detroit has no chance to make the playoffs, no matter what.
Because they're head-to-head. Yep.
Right. So that affects motivation. So I'm skeptical that they put Green Bay in the night window. I mean, maybe the NFL says, screw it. The Packers are a big enough draw, winning in that's a big enough scenario for us to put them on Sunday night. I don't know. But my guess is that they'll want to line up those two games because like you said, Green Bay is somehow the only team that doesn't need help. Do you have a guess on the line for Packers Lions, by the way? I don't know if you've checked yet.
I have not checked, so let's do guess the lines. First of all, I will say, speaking of motivation, it's Dan Campbell. I don't think motivation is going to be a problem. He seems like the type of coach that's going to have them fired up regardless. I will say Packers minus 3.5 with a total of 47.
Total is 48.5 across the board, and the line is Packers 4.5.
Okay, I can see it. it.
Yeah, I mean, it was at 3. The look ahead was at 3 yesterday afternoon, and it jumped from 3 to 4.5 after yesterday's results, which says a lot because the Lions look great playing against the Bears.
Yeah, they did. The Lions are a different animal at home than they are on the road. I think you saw 2 weeks ago what happened in Carolina, so I think you could see that as the pathway to them being a bigger underdog. So, yeah. Let's talk Lions and Bears. Bears, first quarter, this is looking like this is going to be a very frisky game. Justin Fields has 100 yards rushing in the first quarter. They're moving the ball at will. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a shootout. This is going to be awesome. No, the Lions destroyed the Bears after that. Just killed them. And the Bears, I mean, Justin Fields is a good story, but it shows there's still a lot of mistakes still in his game. And of course, the defense is just tragic right now.
Yeah, I mean, that was my main takeaway is like, I think week to week, we sometimes forget just how bad this Bears defense could be because Justin Fields is so much fun. I mean, first drive of the game, Justin Fields is, leads Chicago down 9 plays, 75-yard touchdown. Had another long run in this game, a 60-yarder. He goes 10 for 132 on the ground. I mean, this was a 10-7 game in favor of the Chicago Bears late in the first quarter. And from then on, I mean, a 34-0 run by Detroit to close out this game. I mean, Detroit, obviously, like you said, different animal at home. Didn't play all that well when they got Green Bay at home earlier this year. Lions won that game. It was ugly. That one, to me, felt like Green Bay just completely threw it away. So I think that is baked into the line as well. But, I mean, you couldn't really ask for a better outcome for this Detroit offense to build some momentum heading into this gigantic Week 18 matchup. I mean, Jamal Williams looked awesome. He basically sealed up the rushing touchdown title. He was 150-1, Jeff, before the season to lead the NFL in touchdowns. So that is very likely to be the case. DeAndre Swift looked fantastic in this game as well. He goes 11 for 78 and a touchdown, 4 for 39 through the air with a touchdown as well. And on the Chicago side, it was just Fields and everybody else. But, I mean, throwing the ball, my goodness, 7 of 21 was Fields in this game for 75 yards. So, kind of one of those reminder games.
18.8. I mean, just, ugh.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. 7 of 21 for 75 yards. You could be great on the ground. You can't be that bad through the air. You cannot expect to, compete in games, let alone win any games when your quarterback is 7 of 21.
Yeah. Khalil Herbert was a little bit more involved. Chase Claypool threw a temper tantrum in this game. I mean, it was just everything went wrong. Just so many bad things that went wrong, that happened this game. On the Bears side of things, obviously. Jamison Williams even had a run for 40 yards. He didn't do anything in the air. Detroit tight ends remain a story. Did you see this stat that since the Hawkinson trade, Detroit tight ends have had like 12 touchdowns? 12?
Yeah, well, who was it a couple weeks ago? Was it Zylstra that had 3?
Yes. And then Brock Wright had 2 yesterday. I mean, and that's the thing is none of these tight end touchdowns have been rostered. Like almost none of them. I mean, maybe like in a 2 tight end league, someone had Brock Wright again, either yesterday or that game against the Giants or against the Jets, maybe. But unlikely. Just
and
wild.
Meanwhile, Amon-Ra St. Brown 4 straight games without a touchdown at the worst possible time. So yeah, I mean, it's been great for Jared Goff, but that's it.
I used Amon-Ra in DFS, but he's got a score to justify the price that he's getting now on DraftKings. And he only had 5 targets too. He used to be a target monster, but this game was such a blowout and they were running the ball with such ease that killed us. I mean, I thought that, the Bears would be a pass funnel and they probably could have been if they needed to, but they didn't need to. handed off. Jamal Williams was averaging 6.5 yards a carry. Swift was averaging 7 yards a carry. Swift was awesome in this game. Where is this all year? It's just they weren't using him in so many cases. I know he was banged up for a while, but some of that is just the usage patterns were just bizarro too.
Yeah, this was the first game in a while where I think like physically he really jumped off the screen, and you're thinking, wow, like he looks really dynamic. He looks really healthy. So I think that's a great sign for Detroit heading into next week. Still only 25 snaps in this game, but I think a lot of that was just the game flow and how out of hand this became. But even in the fourth quarter, like Jamal Williams still ripped. He had like a 60-yard run in the fourth quarter when it was very clear that they were just running the ball every single play to run out the clock, and the Bears still couldn't stop him in that scenario. So again, encouraging offensive performance for Detroit. I think this is exactly what you wanted to happen, going into week 18. But at the same time, I mean, you're going up against a much, much better Packers defense, which, as you know, I'm skeptical of the Packers defense. I don't even think they're a good defense, but it speaks to how bad Chicago is. I mean, this is probably the worst defense in the league right now.
Yep. 100% agree. Minnesota. I'm curious to see if Minnesota plays all their starters. Well, I guess they will, because they can still get the 2 seed if the Niners somehow lose. They're not going to lose to Arizona, but they almost lost to the Raiders, so you never know. So, but getting the 2 seeds is important. You don't want to have to travel to San Francisco. So I think they'll play all their starters. Jefferson's going to go for like 250 just to tick me off. But so it goes. All of our podcasts are brought to you by the Blue Wire Network. Here's a couple of our ads. All right, let's talk NFC West. Let's talk about the Niners and Raiders. What a game. What unexpected great game. I mean, I totally thought this was going to be a smash. I would have taken the Niners to cover even before the car news. I was happy that I was able to lock in my pick before the line moved. And then, I guess I'm going to have to answer stardom or stidham questions next week. But, the Raiders had a lot of fight in them. They looked great. I think the Niners were a little surprised, maybe even looking ahead a little bit because of all the things that are happening in Vegas this past week.
Yeah, I think so. I was completely wrong about this one. This one in the Green Bay game were my two just huge misses in week 17. I mean, I had said to Alan that I thought if there was one team out there who I just don't really trust to show up when it feels like everything's going wrong and I could just see a complete laydown, it would be the Raiders. And we got the opposite of that. The Raiders, this was maybe as good as they've looked as a complete team in a while, especially given the opponent. Credit to San Francisco for not wilting. I think there are a lot of teams that, even good teams in the NFL, can kind of find ways to lose games. We've kind of talked about San Francisco just in some ways just being due for a loss. I mean, they have not lost since that Chiefs game in the middle of the season. So it's not crazy to get tripped up regardless of the opponent. We've seen it with all the other good teams in the league. But they once again find a way. And I mean, they've now scored 30 plus in 5 of the last 7 games. I mean, this offense just continues to roll week after week after week. Put up 37 last week again against the Commanders. They had 35 on Tampa, 33 on Miami. So even with Brock Purdy, looking a little bit shakier than he has the last couple of weeks, I still come out of this, kind of, if you're a Niners fan, it's like, yeah, you wish it was a blowout, but at the same time, I think, your team showed some resolve. And if you're not going to drop a game, they're probably going to enter the playoffs on a 10-game winning streak. I think this was kind of closest thing maybe that they'll have to a true test before you get into the postseason.
Agreed. Hypothetical question. Jimmy G by the start of the playoffs is fully healthy. Do you return to him or do you go with Brock Purdy?
Oh boy, that's a good. I think I'd stick with Purdy. I think I would. I think he hasn't really given you any reason not to. I think with Garoppolo, he's earned that. I guess the question is do you want that hanging over your team week after week? Because let's say you start Purdy and you pull off a narrow victory in the wild card round, those questions are still going to be there. So I feel like if you're going to go to Garoppolo, either have to do it right away or not do it at all. To me, I would roll with Purdy though. I really would. I mean, we'll see what is the latest update on Garoppolo. Is this a potential option?
There was some talk that he was going to get the cast off and then he was going to be in a walking boot and they were going to get the walking boot off sometime between these games, I think. Then they test their progress then after that. Purdy actually kind of looked exposed a little bit in the second half against the Raiders. He threw that interception that was an underthrown ball where he saw Kittle break open late. They ran this play and he didn't get the ball far enough or out soon enough, and it got picked off. And he had a couple other bad throws in that sequence. Raiders actually had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter before the Niners roared back. I don't know. It was one of those where I was like, yeah, I could see he's starting to be exposed maybe just a little bit. I don't know, but we'll see. He also didn't get sacked still. I mean, he's still, he averaged 8 yards per attempt. That's still pretty good. Not amazing, but pretty good. I like how he's unlocked Kittle. Ayuk had a huge game. Ayuk looked like the guy that was a first-round pick. He looked like the part. He looked practically unstoppable. And lately he's had a number of games where he's been running great routes. It's a question of having he sometimes has a couple of drops here and there. He looked awesome, and he looked great in the fourth quarter on that comeback. I was looking forward to more overtime production from him and from Kittle. Kittle obviously looks pretty good. He only had 4 catches yesterday, but scored for the fourth week in a row. He's been 5 touchdowns in the 3 fantasy playoff games.
He continues to be the biggest beneficiary of the Deebo Samuel injury, and it sounds like we could see Deebo next week. We'll see. Obviously that they're going to be closely monitoring what's going on in the Minnesota game, as well as the Philly game. San Francisco still alive for the one at this point. Ayuk, I mean, like you said, I think he's been very quietly one of the most improved players in the league this season, in all likelihood, going to top 1,000 yards, assuming he plays enough next week. So best year of his career by far. Like you said, you kind of forget that he's a first-round pick. He's just not really talked about in that context, but he's come along. He's been really huge for them this year. And to me, though, I don't really have that many concerns about San Francisco's offense in this game. It's like, yes, it does feel like at some point, the Purdy thing might catch up to the 49ers, just the inexperience. But to me, the far bigger issue is you allow Jarrett Stidham to throw for almost 370 yards and put up 34 points. I think it was more of a letdown defensively than offensively to me.
Agreed. And Josh Jacobs got to 69 yards. I think that's the first running back that's top 60 yards all year against them. No, he only averaged 4 yards a carry. Nick Bosa after the game said Jacobs is the best back he's ever played against.
I saw that. I'm like, that can't
where'd
be
that
right.
come from?
Yeah, I mean, that's high praise, certainly, but I assume Nick Bosa has played against like Adrian Peterson at some point, right? I guess maybe it was late career Adrian Peterson, but I thought that was a little bit of a hasty quote, especially after it's not like Jacobs ran for 250 yards at this game.
He played against peak Todd Gurley. We know that.
Yeah, right.
I think he did. Although, and Bosa's missed a number of games every year too, so maybe there's something there. But I don't know. It was interesting. Well, Jacobs is a free agent, this offseason. Perhaps he's laying some groundwork for come join us. I don't know. I don't know. It's just throwing that out there as a possibility. Devontae Adams with that catch and the 2-minute drill was just the sickest thing I've seen this year. He and Mike Williams were putting on in separate games, a contest of who could have the better catch.
Yeah, Mike Williams, it feels like whenever he's healthy, he's good for one of those per game. And Devontae, I mean, this was a really interesting spot for Devontae. I mean, he's coming off of the 2 for 15 effort last week against Pittsburgh, and you're thinking, okay, he's clearly upset about the Carr situation. It's like you're going to start him in fantasy no matter what, of course, but I wouldn't have had high expectations. So this was, to me, the absolute best case scenario for Devontae Adams, given that Jarrett Stidham was throwing him the ball. I mean, 11 targets, 7 for 153, 2 more scores. I mean, he's putting together just another ridiculous year. I mean, he's still got a game left. And the last 3 seasons, he has 18, 11, 14 touchdowns. He's been right around 1,400 plus yards in each of those seasons. He set the Raiders single season record for yards this past week. It's going to go down as a disappointing year for the Raiders, but just in terms of that trade, I mean, it's absolutely worked out for Las Vegas. It hasn't led to as many wins as they'd hoped, but everybody who thought Devontae Adams was just a product of Aaron Rodgers, that is not the case.
Yeah, I think that was proven pretty conclusively, and you could just see what happened to the Packers passing game this year too without him too. On both sides of that coin, you could see that being the case. That Rodgers may have helped make Adams, but Adams would have gotten there. It seems like to me. We'll see what happens this offseason. The Raiders. I think my friend Jeff Feinberg on the Pat Mayo Media Network, he does a podcast with him, Pat Mayo and Timmy Anderson, and he has a theory like, backup quarterbacks at first exposure, they can look pretty good. It's after that when the team gets more film on them, it can be the case. So, like, Yeah, it's the Mike White theory. Mike White didn't look that great yesterday. We're all like, oh, yes, Mike White's back. Yes. Well, maybe not. Stidham, it could be the same thing. Same thing with Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think with Stidham, is there any chance that he's really playing for something as far as his future with this team? Or do you think they go shopping for a quarterback, whether it's on the open market, trade, draft? Is there really anything at stake for him this coming week?
I mean, we'll see. It's Stidham's first start. We've heard the name like forever, right? Like kind of like, oh yeah, well, they're recycling Stidham. No, he's never started. All these times, with the Pats, there's the threat of starting him is during those Cam Newton years. It's like, hey, they really love Stidham, and then he'd play in relief every once in a while, but he never once started a game.
Well, I mean, he's one of those guys that's, if you follow college football and recruiting, I mean, he was a big time recruit. You've been hearing this name for, it feels like a decade at this point. So yeah, he's one of those guys who it just felt like was always destined to get a shot. Like when you're super highly recruited coming out of high school, like those guys tend to linger around. And finally it happened. I mean, again, this was basically the best case for him. I mean, through the interception and overtime, of course, to kind of punctuate it, but still, I mean, 23 completions, 365 yards. I wouldn't go as far as to say, he's auditioning for a starting role next year. I don't think that's on the table, but nonetheless, I mean, if he plays well next week, I think teams are going to at least be sniffing around, and they are home for the Kansas City Chiefs. That is the other Saturday game, by the way, Chiefs Raiders in the afternoon window. I
think he's auditioning to be the next Jacoby Brissett, to be the caretaker for the next person that's ascended. But I think that's about, but hey, maybe you're underestimating him. The other NFC West game we got to talk about is the Seahawks beating the Jets convincingly the whole way through. I mean, they jumped on them early, got the 10 points in the first quarter. And, the offense wasn't great. Kenneth Walker had that one big 60-yard run, and Geno Smith threw for 2 touchdowns, but only threw for 183 yards. But the defense just absolutely shut down the Seahawks. I mean, shut down the Jets. It's not just a Zach Wilson problem. It turns out it's an offensive line problem. Turns out it's, Mike White wasn't that great. In fact, he was outright bad yesterday. 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, 5.2 yards per attempt. Got sacked four times. I think that offensive line is really awful. I think that's one of the big takeaways from the Jets season.
Yeah, we don't really talk about them missing Mekhi Becton, but I think that is a big deal for the Jets. This is a game that it felt like, based on what I read and listened to this past week, it's like almost everybody was on the Jets here. And just thinking like, Seattle's too banged up. The offense is crumbling. The defense is terrible. Mike White's back. The Jets will be fine. And this was kind of a reminder to me that like Mike White is still Mike White, right? Like I think he came in, had that great game against the Bears. He's really done nothing other than that. They've lost all the other games that he started. I know he's been banged up. I get that. He's better than Zach Wilson. I'll keep reiterating it, but he's not anything special here. I mean, this was, like you said, really never close. Seattle very nearly had a pick 6 on the Mike White first interception. It could have been worse early on, ended up in a field goal. But yeah, really disappointing effort from the Jets offense in this game. Weren't really able to get much going on the ground. Mike White was under siege the entire day, ended up being sacked 4 times. And then on the other side, I mean, the one unit that you felt like you could really depend on in this game, that Jets defense, 2 straight weeks, not looking all that great. I foolishly took the under on 61.5 rushing yards for Kenneth Walker. Oops. And one play into the game, that was pretty much
That was funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And the thing is, normally betting against running backs against the Jets had been a positive proposition.
I thought so too. It was part of I had 4 picks going on Prize Picks, and I'm like, all right, feel great about this. Like, immediately dead.
Yeah. That's annoying. That's super annoying there when you see that happen like that. You don't even get a sweat. That's the thing that's frustrating there. I had a theory that Kenneth Walker had been minimally practicing the last 2 weeks because prior to his injury, it looked like he had been hitting the rookie wall. And I think, and Pete Carroll had a comment on Friday saying he's going to have fresh legs for this one, even though he's listed as questionable. I think he missed a practice, was limited in 2 others. That he's purposely holding him back in practice to kind of keep him fresh. I think this is a praise Pete Carroll comment here. I think he's crazy like a fox that way, trying to keep him ready, keep him fresh as best as possible, knowing that you need him in the games. and just keep him in. Like I got fooled the week before against the Chiefs that, I thought, oh, he didn't practice at all. I'm definitely fading him. And to my chagrin, he looked really good in the second half of that game against the Chiefs. That was like an eye-opener to me that, okay, this is purposeful. This isn't he can't go. It's we're resting him.
Yeah, that's I think smart to kind of parse Pete Carroll's words in that situation. I mean, he really has looked fantastic each of the last 2 weeks. Went through a really rough stretch, kind of near the end of the fantasy regular season, and now coming out of this game, it's interesting. I mean, Garrett Wilson versus Kenneth Walker for Rookie of the Year is basically neck and neck, depending on where you look. They're both around like plus 100, plus 150. It really might come down to who has the better Week 18, which is pretty wild. And Brock Purdy, by the way, is at 4-1 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year.
That's amazing.
Right? I mean, that it says a little bit more maybe about the class overall and some of the injuries. Somebody like Breece Hall, if he stayed healthy, it kind of felt like he was well on his way. But Brock Purdy has entered the discussion here. And look, if he finishes off the season, what would he be, 6-0? Maybe. To me, that's too small of a sample. You can't miss like 12 games and then win Rookie of the Year. But he's going to get votes if the odds are correct here, because it's basically a 3-man race according to the sportsbook.
What's Pickett at now?
30-1 at PointsBet.
Are you serious?
Right?
That's insane.
I know. I'd rather vote Pickett.
That is insane to me. I mean, okay, yes, if you go strictly by the numbers, I get it. Kenny Pickett's gotten better over the course of the season. He's led the Steelers to 2 big comeback wins in a row. This is on a very bad Steelers offense. And I don't think it's because of Pickett. I think he's doing the best he can under the circumstances. I think his game has gotten better. I mean, I think he did they're asking him to manage the game, but managed the hell out of it last night against the Ravens. That comeback was huge. Yep. I mean, you can just see like the Steelers. Mike Tomlin he's such a darn good coach. I want to hate him. I want to hate the Steelers. I'm a Bengals fan. I respect the hell out of Mike Tomlin. He is such an awesome coach. The way he has that team playing right now, the way that they're like backing each other's plays, and it's like you could just see like you don't want to run into this team. I mean, when they're going to be good again, Pickett's going to be good. I understand number wise, he's not that great. Matt Canada is probably a bad offensive coordinator. I think that's part of my reaction here a little bit, but I think that it's insane that Purdy's odds are so much shorter than Pickett's. If the Steelers get into the playoffs somehow, my mind's going to be blown. Because they've got they don't control their own destiny. They need a lot of things to happen, but they've done their part. And if they win against the Browns next week, they're going to go 9-8 after being 3-8. Just amazing to me.
I would have thought that final throw last night would have been enough to push Pickett down to like 15-1. I mean, 30-1 is crazy. Oftentimes just being a rookie quarterback who starts virtually the entire season can be enough to put you into this race. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would bet it, but at 30-1 is still pretty wild value, because I do think, like, let's say Pickett has a huge game, they beat the Browns, they get the results they need, and they go into the playoffs. I think there's going to be this upswell of support for Kenny Pickett to potentially win that award. So if you're in a state where you could maybe just sneak in a small number on Pickett, 30-1, I would consider it. And by the way, to make the playoffs, the Steelers need to, 1, beat the Cleveland Browns. 2, they need the Dolphins to lose to the Jets. And 3, they need the Patriots to lose to the Bills. Possible, not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever.
Yeah, Dolphins, Jets, that might be the hardest one of those to overcome, I think. No. Yeah, definitely the hardest, because the Bills will beat the Pats. The Bills have a lot to play for in terms of seeding, and they want home field badly for the playoffs there. We'll get to Bengals Bills in a second here tonight, but there's a lot to play for there. So I think, but the Jets, they're done, they're out. I think that's going to be the tough part to hurdle, even though Miami, I mean, God, Miami's a mess too. We'll see. We'll get you want to talk Miami, New England? Let's talk Miami, New England here.
Let's do it. Yeah, I mean, this was, I took the Patriots in this game. You kind of felt like it was going to be a weird one, on the road at New England this late in the year. You felt like it was going to be close no matter what. And of course it was. We discussed with Alan on the XM show the last few days, leading into this game, of like, it feels like there's a reasonable chance we see Skylar Thompson, just because Teddy Bridgewater has tended to be pretty fragile. And, of course, had the hand injury midway through this game. And Skylar Thompson actually ended up attempting more passes than Teddy Bridgewater. That was not a great development for the Miami Dolphins, who somehow, their playoff hopes are now hanging by a string after they were in first place in this division not all that long ago. But Pat's defense, once again, stepping up and in my mind, winning them this game. I mean, Mac Jones played okay. I thought this is probably the good version of Mac Jones at this point, 20 of 33, just over 200 yards, had the 2 touchdowns. Patriots weren't really able to run the ball. Not a great day for Stevenson or Harris. They split the workload pretty evenly, but yeah, getting another defensive touchdown. I think that's 4 or 5 now on the year for New England. That's how they've been able to stay alive.
Yeah. Miami had copious injuries, and not to make too many excuses for him, but I thought Teddy Bridgewater would move in a little bit more seamlessly than he did. But Miami had they didn't have Terran Armstead, and I should have, weighted that a little heavier. That was a big aspect there. Not having him, protecting Bridgewater's backside there was tough. Bridgewater, was bad in this game, but he had some help. And then, of course, the pick six was a huge play. Not just it was huge in 2 respects. One, because of the actual result, but then 2, it knocked Bridgewater out of the game.
Yeah, exactly. To me, it wasn't clear if he hurt his finger kind of following through on that throw. It looked like he made contact, or if it was on a tackle attempt at the end of that pick six by Kyle Duggar. But either way, didn't see him. I mean, you could tell he couldn't really grip a football. Was attempting to on the sideline. And I mean, I don't know that we don't see Skylar Thompson starting this next game, right? I mean, I think it's completely possible that Bridgewater, I believe he was diagnosed with a fractured finger on his throwing hand. I think it's very possible he doesn't play. And I think we're kind of in the same situation still with Tua, right? We're like, it's kind of an unanswerable question of like, okay, what is the acceptable amount of time now before, it's universally recognized that it's okay that he plays? Whether he's out of concussion protocol or not, I don't know that that's going to matter. So I would say as of right now, the most likely scenario is that Skylar Thompson is starting next week.
Yeah, I agree. Just because of all the history here with Tua, I think that's probably the most likely scenario. Stephania Bell, earlier in the week, had a tweet saying what is, all these people that are declaring he shouldn't play the rest of this year. Okay, well, what's your based on what medical science are you basing on? As she actually has the medical background on that there in this question. It's not just passage of time. Yeah, I think that's the thing that with concussions is they are hard to pin down. They are hard. We saw, who was it? We saw another case there that this past week where a player looked like he was coming. Oh yeah, Colt McCoy. Oh yeah, he cleared concussion protocol. Oh nope, he's displaying symptoms again. That happens with concussions. It's not this happens a lot. It's why concussions are so tricky to diagnose and treat.
Yeah, 100%. And we're seeing the Dolphins as 2.5-point favorites at DraftKings over the Jets in Week 18. They're at home. It's hard to read too much into that line. I think if we get the announcement that it's Thompson, that could move a little bit. Although the Jets have nothing to play for at this point, so I think that's factored in. And in order to make the playoffs, the Dolphins need to win that game, and they need New England to lose at Buffalo, which, again, as you alluded to, likely to be something on the line for Buffalo. However, if they lose tonight against Cincinnati, that would knock them down to 12-4. The Bengals would also be 12-4. They would, of course, have the tiebreak over the Bills, and the Chiefs would be sitting at 13-3. So the Bills would have no path to the 1 seed at that point, correct?
Say that, yeah. Let's see.
If the Bills lose to the Bengals, I don't believe they can get the 1 seed, because
I think you're right.
Even if Cincinnati, or even if Kansas City were to lose next week to the Raiders, Cincinnati would then, by virtue of being 13-4, assuming they win next week, would have the tiebreak over Kansas City based on head-to-head.
Yeah, I guess it's because if the Bengals win, then and especially because if the Bengals win, that clinches the division for them. They still haven't clinched the division, even with Baltimore losing last night. They still have to win tonight to have it clinched, or beat Baltimore next week, because Baltimore beat them the first time.
Yep, exactly. I think that game is also a possibility for Sunday Night Football. So that's kind of why I think the league wants to wait and at least have a gauge for how tonight's game is going. Because, you could make a case for 3 or 4 different options. But, Bengals Ravens for the 3 seed / AFC North is, that would be a very solid Sunday night game. I think you'd be okay with that.
Yeah. honestly, I had preferred to have a normal, boring Sunday afternoon game against them at this point in time, because that would mean that in that case that the Bengals had already clinched or at least done something right about that. But also, yeah, I don't want them prime time to risk losing the division to the stupid Ravens. I don't even want to even think about that one there. Man, the Ravens. Speaking of the Ravens, let's talk Ravens in a second. But before we do that, quick note from our friends at Monkey Knife Fight here, because we need to get this one in. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action that you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. All right, Nick, the Ravens, they have a prehistoric offense. They're just so tough to watch. Really, I mean, I respect the head of John Harbaugh. I think he's a great coach. Lamar not being there obviously is huge. This offense is designed around Lamar, not around Tyler Huntley, and it shows. But man, just give me one wide receiver that's a threat at all. Mark Andrews, he somehow ended up for 9 for 100, and I can't tell you 2 plays that stood out in my mind about that he made. I mean, he got there, and I remember like one play along the sideline where he made a really nice catch. His longest catch was 19 yards. They just don't have any explosive passing plays at all.
No, I think was it last week they had the Demarcus Robinson touchdown. That was their first touchdown by a receiver since week 3. I mean, that is just alarming. That should never happen in the modern NFL. This game to me felt eerily similar to last week for Pittsburgh, where they were trailing throughout. They were down 2 scores at one point, and lo and behold, they get the ball late, and for the second week in a row, they basically win on a walk-off fashion. And Baltimore had a chance late in this game with under a minute left to make something happen. And I mean, Tyler Huntley, I don't even know what he was looking at. Gets picked by Minkah Fitzpatrick with about 20 seconds left on the clock. Tough situation either way. It's not like you could say Lamar Jackson absolutely leads you down to a touchdown there, but Tyler Huntley did not play well once again in this game.
No.
Other than finding Mark Andrews, Andrews accounted for 100 of the 130 yards passing for the Ravens. 9 of the 14 completions for Tyler Huntley. And the big thing with Huntley, I've kind of supported him in the past. He's been a fun player. He hasn't been good this season, but he's not giving you anywhere close to the production on the ground of Lamar Jackson. Like you can live with him not being as good of a passer, but if he's also only rushing for 24 yards on 7 carries, like what is the point?
Yeah. Baltimore wide receivers, 2 catches for 18 yards on 5 targets. Doesn't matter who the number one is. Yeah. Likely. Yeah. It was, that they were lucky to get that touchdown, by the way, because they had the penalty there on, that post play penalty on Cam Hayward, which I didn't even think. I thought it was kind of a ticky-tack sort of penalty in the first place there. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he was provoked. I thought that should have been either a no call or offsetting. That was great. Especially given the situation, that was on 3rd down, I believe, right? They were very clearly
they're going to have to come off the field and kick the field goal right before half.
I didn't like
they gave them time for one more offensive play, basically, too. That was the funny thing. So Pickett wasn't great in this one. Najee Harris was great. Harris had a lot of jump. Literally, he jumped over the pile on one run for a 7-yard run. He didn't have a big play. He had his longest was 15. So to average 5 yards per carry when your long is 15, that shows he was steady the entire game. Obviously, he caught the pass for a touchdown. They should throw to him more. But he looked good. Jaylen Warren looked good. This isn't a great offense either. It's a pretty bad offense also. There's a reason why the total in this game was 35. But yeah, Harris looks good, and Pickett made plays when he had to. I guess that's the kind of response I have from this game.
First 100-yard game for Najee Harris since week 17 of last season.
Wow.
Anybody who's watched the Steelers this year, that checks out. You're like, yeah, I feel like he has 18 for 58 every week, and that's pretty much the truth. But no, you're right. 2 of the last 3 weeks, I thought he looked really good in that Carolina game as well. It was one of those that was not a high yards per carry game, but he just looks like he's running better than he was earlier in the year. You do wonder if maybe that foot was an issue at all. But this was the Najee Harris that we saw on display last season. I mean, super dynamic, running hard. I mean, there were multiple times where he's carrying 3 or 4 defenders for an extra yard or two at the end. So yeah, he was Pickett played well. You know, he gets credit for the touchdown at the end, but I thought Najee Harris was very, very clearly the Steelers' best player, because beyond that last drive, I mean, the Steelers were not moving the ball. Like we could criticize the Baltimore Ravens passing game. It wasn't a whole lot prettier for Pittsburgh. I mean, Pat Freiermuth was the leading receiver with 36 yards.
Yeah. And it seemed like he was making more plays, because I kept on hearing Muth or whatever, but I guess it was only 3 catches. Felt like 10. But I don't know. It was wild to see that there. Yeah. So I haven't done guess the lines yet for Pittsburgh and Cleveland yet, but I got to imagine Pittsburgh's gonna be riding high. Although Cleveland won too. I don't know. I'd guess that Pittsburgh would be like a 5-point favorite in this one, maybe 5.5.
I haven't looked yet either. Do you want me to reveal it, or
Let's
should we
do
save
it
for
Why
the
not?
XM show?
Okay. Let's do this one.
So,
Let's let the RotoWire people get something here.
Okay, excellent. So over at the DraftKings Sportsbook, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 3-point home favorites against the Cleveland Browns. Total of 39.
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland won on the road finally. That's something they haven't been doing a whole lot of, but the thing is, this is such a Cleveland finish. They're out of the playoffs. They're 7-9. They could finish 8-9. Be a spoiler here, and it's a pretty decent season. Deshaun Watson only completed 9 passes yesterday, but it was for 3 touchdowns. He came up big in moments, and some bad tackling on Amari Cooper helped a little bit there. But there are other moments where he didn't look great. He got sacked 5 times. They called that designated run on 4th down, and that first goal line sequence. Nick Chubb gets him into the red zone, and they take him out of the game inside the 10-yard line for 4 plays.
They called that designated run. It was on 4th down, right? And it was like they were at like the 4-yard line. I'm like, you just like it was actually there. I think he gained like 2 yards. Like, you just can't call that far away from the goal line. I thought that was just such an amateur call by Stefanski.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all. I don't know. I'm still not sold on Watson. I didn't get picked, so there is that. Didn't fumble anything. Chubb, 14 for 104. Why not more? I don't know. That's also part of my NFFC non-winning overall playoff team. But I mean, at least I won my league. I shouldn't be too upset, but I am. I want more. So that's all I got to say about them. About tonight's game. Go ahead. You were going to say something. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to point out that, yes, Deshaun Watson did not throw an interception, but he also only threw the ball 18 times in this game somehow. He was 9 of 18 for 169 yards and 3 touchdowns. One of the more bizarre lines that you're going to see from him. I mean, he basically had as many carries as completions in this game. But let's go to Bengals Bills and finish out.
Yeah, I was just looking at the total plays on this one there. Only 53 for the Browns, 68 for the Commanders. That's not even a lot for the Commanders, even for that matter. All right. Scott asks, I need 42 points from Josh Allen tonight, 6 points for passing, 6 points for any TD. What are his chances? Well, Scott, no offense, I am going to kind of have to root against this happening for you tonight. So it colors my answer. But I actually do think this is a little bit, both defenses in this game are underrated. I think everybody's like, oh yes, Burrow, Allen, let's see a shootout. This will be awesome. I don't know if that necessarily happens. I know the total's like at 49.5, 50 in most places. I don't mind the under in this one, although I betting unders is always a painful experience because you're just rooting against things the whole time.
Yeah, I've seen the total up at 50.5 at some books. So I think the belief is that we do get somewhat of a shootout here. And yeah, I mean, I could absolutely see this game being played in the high 20s. I don't know, I don't think we're going to see like a 43-40 type of game here, but it's always in the cards. I mean, if we're talking chances to get 42 out of Allen, it's not good, obviously. I mean, if there's any quarterback who's on the short list of guys who can get there, it is him. But I mean, I would go like 10%. I don't know. I mean, like Tom Brady, the day he had yesterday in the league where I have him in PPR, I mean, 38 fantasy points out of Brady. So it's like, is he going to do markedly better than Tom Brady's 432 yards, 3 touchdowns plus a rushing touchdown? Probably not.
No, probably not. So I'd say the chances are pretty, I mean, it's possible with Allen, but and 6 points for a passing TD will help get you there. But I would say you're probably a 10% chance to get there, maybe less even. Would be my guess as far as that goes. Yeah, I am so excited about this game, though. I've been pointing to this game ever since the schedule came out. Obviously, both teams, both fan bases are crazy about this. The Bills Mafia will find their way into the stadium. I know the Bengals sold out their season ticket package in a hurry, but nonetheless, um, it won't be like Niners in Vegas yesterday, where it was like probably 2/3 Niners fans, or not, and Niners in any game in LA for that matter is the same way. I don't think it'll be that bad, but there'll be plenty of Bills fans there. I'm thinking, but I can't wait for this game. It's so exciting to see, and even though I'm pretty darn nervous at this point in time, I'm excited about it.
I'm fired up to do the show during this game, man. It's gonna be an awesome 2 hours. We'll basically get usually the entire first half of the game transpires during the XM show. So if you're listening to this pod, make sure you check us out on Sirius XM 7 to 9 p.m. Central, Monday through Thursday. Conditions are looking good in Cincy tonight. Should be around 60 degrees. Really no wind at all, no precipitation. So playing into maybe this narrative that we do get a high scoring game, but either way, I mean, obviously if the Bengals win this game, to me, they have the two most impressive wins of the entire season. They will have swept Kansas City and Buffalo, which is wild. But at the same time, it's like, it doesn't feel like if the Bengals lose this game, as long as they don't just get completely blown out, like you're not going to be devastated, right? It's like you already proved that you could beat the Chiefs. I think in some ways this could end up being a rematch in a few weeks. So even if you beat the Bills, it's not like you vanquished them forever. So I think it's a fun test. It's rare this late in the season that we get this type of game, but at the same time, I think both teams probably come into this saying, all right, this is a big game, but I think we might see each other again in the postseason, and that's when it's really going to matter.
Yeah, agreed. And if the Bills win, they'll have the two most impressive wins, beating Kansas City in Kansas City and Cincinnati in Cincinnati.
True.
I can see that too as a case there. Yeah, super excited about this one there. And it's such an impactful game too. Both teams, despite both teams making the playoffs, this is like, it changes so many different things. I mean, granted, I still think KC is going to end up with the one. I don't see them losing against the Raiders next week, but stranger things have happened. We'll see about that. Any other takeaways from this week? I know we didn't painstakingly go game by game this week. I didn't think that the format really worked out that well for that, but was there anything you wanted to share from any other games? Any other takeaways?
No, not too much. I'm just really fired up for Saturday night. Obviously,
yeah.
It's good. Possible game of the century. Packers Jaguars Whalen Bowl is still on the table. Improbably, whoever would have thought. But no, I'm fired up, man. It's tough. It's the end of the fantasy season, so now we kind of go into this weird week 18 where you're relying on DFS and player props and things like that, and instead of fantasy championships. But I'm fired up. I'm really, really excited. We have so much on the line still in week 18. I mean, it felt like we had a lot on the line by week 17 standards, and there's still so much unsettled at this point. So very few just completely meaningless games coming up next week. And, we'll get rid of those in the early window on Sunday anyway.
Exactly. All right, folks, good stuff there. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you. Good luck. And if you've got anything on the line tonight, and thanks again for tuning in all season long. Nick and I have had a blast doing this. Please make sure to still continue to check us out on SiriusXM Fantasy. If you've got irons in the fire this week, we got free agents tomorrow with Jake and Joe, and we'll have our regular podcast schedule all week long. Stay tuned. And thanks again for listening to RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast here, brought to you by No House Advantage.